Perhaps few questions have lasted so long and been so widespread in the human mind as the question, where does the soul of sentient beings begin? Whether in ancient times or the modern day, whether you live in a small village or a great city, the moment you sit quietly and reflect on yourself, this question easily arises. Where did I come from? Did I exist somewhere before I was born? After death, where will I go? Deeper still, the thing I call I or soul, where did it begin? These questions are at once philosophical and religious, yet also very close to everyday life. For thousands of years, many cultures and religions have tried to answer them. Some traditions say, before we are born, our soul already exists in some realm, then enters this body when our parents conceive us. Elsewhere, people believe a creator makes the soul and gives it to each person at conception. There are also views that the soul has existed from time immemorial, is immortal, never perishes, and that our present life is only a temporary chapter in that endless journey. Though different, these views share one point. They all affirm the existence of an unchanging entity, the soul as the core of a person, the true essence of each individual. From this perspective, practice or living a virtuous life is often understood as keeping that soul pure or bringing it back to a higher place. Buddhism, especially in the Abhidhamma, takes a completely different path. After awakening, the Buddha did not affirm that there is an immutable soul dwelling in every being. He did not use the notion of essence or self as a support to explain life. Instead, he pointed out a profound reality. What we call I is only a composite of ever-changing components, body feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, gathered into what is called the 5 aggregates. None of these aggregates is permanent. There is nothing fixed that could be called a soul. If you hear this for the first time, it may feel strange. Our sense of I is so strong that we take it to be real. We remember childhood and the past. Those memories seem to bind us from youth until now, so we think there must be something holding everything together, which we call the soul. The Abhidhamma explains that this seeming continuity arises from the uninterrupted succession of mind. It is like looking at a candle that burns through the night. The flame appears the same, yet at every moment, the fuel and the light have changed. Nothing remains identical. If there is no unchanging soul, the question, where does the soul of beings begin, becomes, where does this stream of consciousness, which we habitually call self, begin? Here the Buddha offers a response very different from the philosophies of his time. This stream of mind has no first beginning. This sounds hard to accept. We are used to thinking everything must have a start, a tree from a seed, a river from a spring, a story from its first page. Why would life not have a first origin? Buddhism says that within the round of rebirth, the endless sequence of birth, aging, sickness, and death, one cannot find the first life of a being. The present life arises from karma and conditions of the previous life from the one before it, stretching without beginning. There is no absolute first point to be found, just as there is no first drop in the water cycle. Water evaporates to form clouds, clouds become rain, rain forms rivers, rivers flow to the sea, and the sea again evaporates. No one can point to the very first drop. The Abhidhamma analyzes further. What people call soul is in fact consciousness, a current of knowing, a stream of mind that succeeds itself. This consciousness is not a motionless observer. It arises and ceases in extremely brief moments. Each moment contains different mental factors, and no two moments are the same. Present consciousness arises based on the previous consciousness, and on present conditions then ceases to make way for the next. This unbroken succession creates the illusion of a long-lasting, unchanging I. If you ask when this stream of mind first arose, the Buddha's answer is that it cannot be determined. In the Samyutta Nikaya, he says the beginning of the round of rebirth cannot be found. Beings covered by ignorance and bound by craving have wandered in birth and death for a very long time. This statement is not meant to discourage us, but to show that chasing a first starting point is fruitless. What matters is not tracing back to an origin, but understanding how the cycle operates right now, so that we can be free of it. Here we see the limits of doctrines that assume dualism or an absolute beginning. If one believes in two unchanging substances like matter and soul, one gets stuck asking which came first or who created them. If one believes in a single first beginning, one must look for a first cause. If that cause does not arise from anything else, it becomes a creator or an absolute essence, which Buddhism does not accept because it contradicts the principle of dependent origination. Buddhism offers another way. Rather than a primordial explosion or an initial act of creation, all phenomena, including consciousness, arise dependently. Nothing exists on its own. Nothing is unchanging. Nothing escapes the law of cause and effect. Your present stream of mind is the result of countless past conditions, and at the same time it is becoming the condition for the next stream of mind, in this life and the next. So where does the soul of beings begin? If soul is understood in the traditional sense as an unchanging entity, the Buddhist answer is that it does not begin anywhere because it does not truly exist. If the question is understood as how does this stream of consciousness appear, the answer is that it appears due to conditions from the combination of past karma and present circumstances. Its appearance has no absolute first beginning. Most important, the Buddha did not want us to rest content with a theoretical answer. He wanted us to look directly into our own stream of mind here and now, to see each thought and feeling arise, endure, and pass away, to see there is no self that controls them, to see that they are phenomena that arise, remain, and cease, according to conditions. When this is seen clearly, the question, where does it begin, gradually loses its weight because we have touched the insight of not self, the key to release from the bonds of birth and death. From a very young age, almost all of us have heard stories, lessons, or traditions about the soul. It may have been the teachings of grandparents and parents' lessons in school ethics, or stories, films, and books. In those stories, the soul is often described as a subtle, invisible, but immortal part dwelling inside each human body. In many cultures, the soul is seen as the driver and the body only a vehicle. When the vehicle breaks down, that is when the body dies. The driver, the soul, departs and seeks a new vehicle. This view sounds reasonable because it explains the feeling that we remain ourselves, even though the body changes over time, and it helps people fear death less because they believe they will still exist somewhere. Many theistic religions even teach that a creator gives the soul at conception, and after death, that soul is taken to a place of reward or punishment forever, according to one's actions in life. This creates a moral system based on rewards and punishments for that soul. But if we look closely, these views share one point in common. They all regard the soul as an immutable entity, meaning it does not change, decay, or come under the influence of time or circumstances. Once someone believes this, they easily fall into two extremes that Buddhism calls eternalism and annihilationism. Eternalism is the belief that we, in the form of a soul, will exist forever and never be lost. Annihilationism is the belief that when the body dies, everything ends completely and nothing remains. Both of these views were rejected by the Buddha because they do not reflect the reality he saw through his insight. Regarding eternalism, the greatest problem is that if there were an unchanging soul, it would never change and would never be affected by life experience. In reality, we can clearly see that people change day by day, not only in appearance and health, but also in character, understanding habits, and preferences. If the soul were truly immutable, why would these changes occur? Why can an innocent child become a tough adult or a slow contemplative elder? As for annihilationism, the problem is that if everything ended completely at death, then karma, that is the imprints of actions, speech, and thoughts, would disappear, and there would be no basis to explain why some people are born fortunate while others are born into suffering. Through his insight, the Buddha saw clearly that karma continues after the body dissolves, and that karma itself leads the process of rebirth without any soul having to go anywhere. One reason the notion of an immutable soul is so widespread is the illusion of the continuity of the ego. Each morning we wake up, we still remember who we are. We still have yesterday's memories. We still have relationships, work, and responsibilities. All these things link together into a story about me. That story is told day after day, year after year, making us believe there is a fixed me that goes through everything. But the Abhidharma points out that this I story is actually formed from millions of mind moments arising and passing away in succession. Each moment has different content and mental factors like individual frames in a film. When the frames are projected quickly and continuously, we see the character move and laugh, but in fact, no one is moving at all. They are only consecutive images. Likewise, there is no I that stretches from past to present. There is only a stream of mind whose continuity creates the feeling of an immutable soul. An everyday example. Recall yourself 10 years ago, your character, thoughts and interests at that time. Compared with now, many things may have changed completely. But if there were an immutable soul that kept everything the same, where would these changes come from? The Abhidharma explains that there is no entity that remains unchanged. There are only conditions that change continuously, and thereby alter the stream of mind. False beliefs about the soul also lead to the consequence that people cling tightly to the ego. When we believe there is an unchanging I, we easily fall into fear of loss, fear of death, fear of being forgotten, and we are easily hurt when honor, status, or opinions are challenged. All these reactions arise from protecting that imagined soul. Buddhism does not deny the existence of mental life, but it emphasizes that this life has no immutable subject. Rather than a soul, there are only mind-mental factors and material phenomena interacting and arising and ceasing according to conditions. When conditions are sufficient, the stream of mind continues in a new life. When conditions end, nothing goes anywhere. There is only the dissolution of conditions. From this angle, we clearly see why clinging to the notion of an immutable soul is a major obstacle on the path of practice. It is like trying to hold on to an illusion, trying to protect a character in a movie we mistake for real. What the Buddha pointed out is to see that the movie is only a sequence of frames, and when the projector that is ignorance and karma stops, the movie naturally ends. No one dies, and there is no one left to go on. When we let go of this mistaken belief, a sense of ease appears. We no longer worry about where our soul will go, no longer fear an eternal realm of reward and punishment, and no longer feel haunted by the task of keeping me in perpetual existence. Instead, we will pay attention to each present mind moment. Is this mind wholesome or unwholesome? What conditions are nourishing it? Can we transform it right now? This is a very important shift. From protecting a non-existent entity, we turn to observing and transforming the process that is actually occurring. This is also the first step toward a deeper understanding of the principle of not-self, the foundation for answering the question of where the soul of sentient beings begins in a complete and liberating way. When speaking of the view that there is no immutable soul, the Buddha did not present it as a philosophical opinion for debate, nor as a new belief to replace an old one. It is the direct result of his seeing after he himself underwent the deepest contemplation of body and mind, seeing to the very roots how all phenomena operate. To understand this more clearly, we must return to how the Buddha looked at a person. Instead of a soul dwelling inside, the Buddha said that a sentient being is only a combination of the 5 aggregates pan. Form aggregate the material factor that includes the body and all related physical phenomena. Feeling aggregate the pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings. Perception aggregate the capacity to recognize, distinguish, and remember forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, and ideas. Volitional formations aggregate the mental activities, will reactions, and attitudes that are wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral. Consciousness aggregate the knowing of an object that is the stream of knowing. When the 6 sense bases contact the 6 sense objects, these 5 aggregates operate in relation to one another, arising and ceasing continuously. None of the 5 aggregates is permanent. There is nothing that is an immutable core to be called a soul. When a person looks at themselves and says, "This is me," they usually latch onto one of these 5 aggregates. For example, when thinking "I am healthy" or "I am beautiful," we are identifying with the form aggregate. When saying "I am happy" or "I am suffering," we are identifying with the feeling aggregate. When recalling I studied at this school, we are identifying with the perception aggregate. When taking pride in I am patient or blaming, I am selfish, we are identifying with the volitional formations aggregate. When asserting I know that, we are identifying with the consciousness aggregate. But with insight, the Buddha saw that all of these are impermanent, conditioned, and therefore cannot be me. He affirmed this very clearly in the discourse on the characteristics of not-self Anattalakkhana Sutta. Bhikkhu's form is not self. If form were self, then form would not lead to affliction, and one could say, let my form be thus, let it not be thus. But because form is not self, it is subject to affliction, and cannot be made to be as one wishes. Feeling is not self-perception, is not self-formations, are not self-consciousness, is not self. Therefore, none of these is self. This is not a denial of the existence of experience or phenomena. It only denies that any component of experience could be an immutable entity. If we compare this with the contemporary philosophies in India, the difference is striking. In the Buddha's time, many Brahmin teachers believed in an immortal individual self that does not arise or cease, and that this individual self is a part of Brahman, the cosmic self. Their goal was union with that great self. The Buddha did not agree. He found nothing of that sort within the five aggregates or outside them, nor did he endorse annihilationism, the view that everything ends completely at death. Through insight, he saw clearly that the continuity of consciousness is not a soul traveling from life to life. It is a process carried forward by causes and conditions. This is like using one burning candle to light another. The new flame is connected to the old, but the old flame does not move across. A subtle point here is that without a deep understanding of not-self, people can fall into the extreme of there is nothing at all, and think the Buddha taught that a person is mere nothingness. In fact, what the Buddha emphasized is that there is a process but no immutable subject within that process. There is life, but that life does not belong to any me. There is a stream of consciousness, but there is no owner of that stream. The Abhidhamma goes further by analyzing this process into extremely fine mind moments. Each moment arises due to conditions, endures for an instant, and ceases, making way for the next. In each moment there may be dozens of mental factors, such as feeling, perception, attention, faith, greed, hatred, and so on, depending on the type of mind. This shows impermanence not only at the level of the body changing over years, but at a subtle level. Even knowing itself arises and ceases in fractions of a second. For this reason, the notion of an immutable soul becomes meaningless in the light of this insight. If what we call I is changing continuously from one mind moment to the next, there cannot be a fixed I to be carried from one life to another. What continues is only the process of conditionality, within which karma plays the guiding role, determining the circumstances and form of rebirth. A very important consequence of denying an immutable soul is that we no longer have a reason to cling to the ego. When we see clearly that there is no real I to protect, we react less extremely to praise and blame. We fear illness, aging, and death less, and we are less prone to rivalry and comparison. All these reactions arise from trying to defend an imagined self. It should also be noted that the Buddha did not deny each person's personal experience. He pointed out that such experience has no immutable center. This both frees us from fear about what will happen to the soul and places responsibility squarely in the present. Every action, word, and thought right now is creating causes for the future. No one else can shoulder it for us, and there is no fixed I that can escape the law of cause and effect. In summary, the Buddha's view of human beings, and by extension all sentient beings, is a soulless view, anatta, but not nihilism. He saw clearly that the process of living is a temporary combination of impermanent, dependently arisen aggregates. Only direct contemplation of this reality can shatter the illusion of an immutable self, which most other systems take as foundational. Among the five aggregates taught by the Buddha, the aggregate of consciousness is often the most misunderstood, especially when compared with the notion of soul in other religions. Because consciousness is knowing, the capacity to cognize many people Think it is the refined essence of us, the part that leaves the body at death and continues intact elsewhere. If form, feeling, perception, and formations all change, then surely consciousness must be the unchanging element, must it not? But the Abhidhamma, together with the Buddha's early teachings, explains very clearly that consciousness is not a fixed entity or a detached observer standing outside and watching. Consciousness is a process, a stream that arises and ceases, continuously dependent on conditions and entirely not self. To picture this, think of a river. The water ever flows drop after drop, wave after wave, with foaming crests passing by, never standing still. You cannot point to a stretch of the river and say, "This is yesterday's water." All has changed. So too with consciousness. It is a flow of cognitive moments arising and ceasing in succession. No two moments are the same. In the Abhidhamma, a single mind moment endures for only 1/17 of the time it takes to blink an eye. This means that even when you think you are continuously knowing something, such as looking at a screen or hearing a voice, the mind is arising and ceasing millions of times per minute. Each moment has its own object and its own mental factors, and then ceases to make way for the next. This shatters the idea that consciousness is an unchanging lamp that shines without interruption. Instead, it is like countless tiny flashes following one another so quickly that we mistake them for a steady light. The sense that we are continuously knowing is actually the result of this rapid succession. Another example is the frames of a film. When projected quickly, they create the impression of smooth movement, but each frame is separate. So too with consciousness. Each mind moment is distinct. There is no person stepping from one moment to the next. If you ask what connects these moments of consciousness, the answer is conditions. Each mind moment arises from the conditions of the previous moment, together with outer conditions, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas, and inner conditions, karma habits, memories, and will. Nothing arises from nothing, and nothing exists independently. This very succession makes many people mistakenly think there is an immutable consciousness that travels across lifetimes. But the Buddha used a famous example, the kindling of lamps. When we use a burning candle to light another, the new flame is related to the old, but the old flame does not move across. Similarly, the rebirth linking mind moment partisandi sita in a new life arises from the conditions of the death proximate moment in the previous life. But no soul departs the corpse to enter a new body. Another important point is that consciousness cannot exist by itself. In the Abhidhamma, each mind sita is always accompanied by many mental factors, such as contact, feeling perception, attention, faith, joy, greed, hatred, and delusion. Mind and mental factors arise together and cease together within the same moment. Consciousness is not a bare knowing. It is knowing already tinged by the mental factors that accompany it. When the factor is greed, consciousness becomes knowing with greed. When the factor is hatred, consciousness becomes knowing with hatred. When the factor is wisdom, consciousness becomes knowing with clarity. Thus, the consciousness we experience each day is not a neutral, immutable entity, but a process that constantly changes according to conditions and is governed by mental factors. If the mental factors are unwholesome, consciousness operates in an unwholesome direction. If the mental factors are wholesome, consciousness operates in a wholesome direction. If the mental factors are deluded, consciousness operates in a murky way. Precisely because consciousness is always changing in this way, the notion of a soul as an unchanging part within consciousness does not accord with reality. What we call me yesterday and me today are in fact completely different at the level of mind moments. Even within a few seconds, we can shift from anger to affection, from affection to remorse, from remorse to indifference. So how could there be a self or an immutable soul that keeps everything the same? The Buddha clearly saw this process and taught that precisely because consciousness is a continuous stream without a center, it can be transformed. If consciousness were immutable, every effort at practice would be meaningless. but because consciousness arises and ceases due to conditions. When we change the conditions through virtue, concentration, and wisdom, we change. And when ignorance and craving no longer serve as conditions, the stream ceases. That is nirvana. In this view, nirvana is not a soul being liberated, but the cessation of the process of arising. Arising and ceasing is the state no longer conditioned, with no knower to continue on, and no soul to wander. And yet it is not nothingness. It is simply the complete stillness of all conditions. When we understand consciousness in this way, we cling less to the question, where does the soul begin? Because we see there is no soul that begins. Instead, we attend to how our present stream of consciousness is operating, which mental factors are nourishing it, and which karmic patterns are shaping it. Most importantly, are we nourishing it with wisdom and compassion, or letting it drift along under ignorance and craving? The answers to these questions truly determine the direction of the stream of consciousness. That is, they determine our life right now and in lives to come. When we ask, where does the soul of beings begin, deep down we have already assumed there must be a starting point. Our life experience has accustomed us to everything having a beginning. A seed sprouts into a tree, the sun rises and sets a story, has a first page. A human life begins at birth. Thus it feels natural to think that the life of each being or their soul must also have a first day. But when the Buddha contemplated deeply the living stream of sentient beings, he saw a completely different truth. An absolute starting point cannot be found. In the Samyutta Nikaya there is a passage recording his words, "Bhikkhu samsara is without discoverable beginning." A first point is not seen of beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving who roam and wander on. The phrase beginningless samsara means this round of birth and death has no first point. However far back you trace through lives and aeons, you always encounter a prior existence. That prior existence had yet another before it, and so on without end. If we compare this with modern science, some will ask, what about the universe? Did it not begin with the Big Bang? But the physical universe and the round of rebirth are not entirely the same. The universe may go through cycles of arising, abiding, and dissolving, but the stream of consciousness of beings is not bound to a single Big Bang. When one universe disintegrates, if the karma of beings has not ended, they continue to be reborn in another realm, another universe. There is no absolute first beginning, only innumerable circles of conditions succeeding one another. This also means there is no first moment when a soul appeared, because, as said earlier, Buddhism does not accept the notion of an immutable soul. What continues from life to life is the stream of consciousness, the stream of mind. And this stream always arises due to conditions, not out of nothing and not from an eternal essence. Here, the Abhidhamma offers an extremely subtle perspective. Each mind arises only with causes, inner factors such as past karma habits, memories, and supporting conditions, outer factors such as sights, sounds, situations, and environment. When conditions are sufficient, mind arises. When conditions are exhausted, mind ceases. When a mind ceases, it leaves karmic imprints that serve as causes for the next mind to arise. This stream operates unceasingly, like a wheel turning continuously. If you ask when the wheel first began to turn, the answer is that it cannot be determined, for it has been turning from innumerable aeons past. What matters is not to find the first day it began to turn, but to see clearly why it is still turning and how to make it stop. This very point helps Buddhism avoid the limitation of absolute origin doctrines. If we claim there is a single starting point, for example, a soul, created at a specific time, we are trapped by the question, what created it? If we answer that it exists by itself, that contradicts the principle of cause and effect. If we answer that some being created it, we fall into a metaphysical belief that cannot be verified. By contrast, the Buddhist principle of dependent origination explains that every appearance requires conditions. Without conditions, there is no appearance. And because conditions succeed one another without end, an absolute first point cannot be found. In other words, the existence of beings is a beginningless causal circle, not a straight line with a starting point. An easy image is the water cycle. No one can find the very first drop. Water evaporates to form clouds. Clouds become rain. Rain becomes rivers. Rivers flow to the sea, and the sea again evaporates. This cycle goes on like that. If you ask where the drop began, the answer is that it has no beginning. It only has conditions to become rain conditions, to become a river, conditions to become the sea. So too with the living stream. The Buddha did not encourage the tracing of an endless past because it is one of the four inconceivables asin intentea, which if pursued only lead to confusion. What he emphasized is this: the problem is not to know where the past began, but to see clearly how the present is operating. For it is precisely the present with ignorance and craving that keeps the wheel of samsara turning. From a practical perspective, understanding beginninglessness changes our approach. We do not search for a first point to remove because there is no such point. We focus on recognizing the present link in dependent origination, ignorance craving, clinging, and breaking it right now. When one link is severed, dependent origination stops, and the stream of rebirth ceases. However long the past may be, in this way the question, where does the soul begin, is transformed into the question, what is nourishing my existence right now? And the answer will not lie in some distant moment, but in each present mind moment, each feeling, each thought. If we hold on to the belief that there must be an origin, the mind will turn outward to search for a story about the beginning. But if we absorb the view of beginninglessness, the mind will turn inward to seek the path of cessation here and now. Precisely here we begin to touch the liberating spirit of the Buddha's teaching. We escape the round of rebirth, not by knowing where it began, but by seeing clearly and releasing the conditions that keep it turning. When the Buddha teaches that the round of rebirth is beginningless, that is, it has no absolute starting point, a natural question arises. If there is no beginning, what keeps this wheel from ever stopping? What sustains the living stream from one life to the next? The short answer in Buddhism is karma. Karma is not a destiny ordained by some supernatural power, nor is it a punishment or reward from an omnipotent being. Karma, in the original sense used by the Buddha, simply means intentional action, cetana. Whenever we think, speak, or act with awareness and purpose, we are creating karma. This intention leaves an imprint in the stream of consciousness, and that imprint, if strong enough and meeting suitable conditions, will bear fruit in the present or in the future. To make this easier to grasp, you can picture karma as seeds. Every thought, word, and deed is a seed sown in the soil of a mind stream that is continuously arising and ceasing. Some seeds sprout right away. Some lie dormant for many years, waiting for the right sun, rain, soil, and wind to ripen. No seed is lost. They only await the proper moment to manifest. In the Abhidhamma, this process is analyzed in detail. Mental karma mano. Karma consists of intentions, thoughts, and attitudes in the mind. Even without outward expression, mental karma is powerful enough to imprint strongly. Verbal karma vachi. Karma is what we say. Wholesome or unwholesome, true or false words yield corresponding results. Bodily karma, kaya karma, is action by the body, helping, killing, giving, stealing. All three kinds of karma have continuity, because each act carries an energy, a direction, a tendency that it plants into the next mind moment. If the act is unwholesome, it leaves an unwholesome imprint that can lead us to future suffering. If it is wholesome, it leaves a wholesome imprint, opening a smoother path in the present and future. Notably, according to the Abhidhamma, only actions with intention create karma. An unintentional act not accompanied by intention does not produce karmic result. For example, if you accidentally step on and kill an ant without knowing it, that is not the karma of killing. But if you kill deliberately, a mind rooted in greed or hatred creates karma, and that karma continues within the mind stream. How then does karma relate to the continuity of life? When a person dies, the final mind moment called the death consciousness kuti sitta ceases. Immediately thereafter, a new mind moment, the rebirth linking consciousness patisandhi sitta, arises in a new life. This rebirth linking mind does not occur because some soul jumps across. It is produced by the rebirth, producing karma janaka, karma that has matured. This rebirth-producing karma may be a powerful, wholesome or unwholesome deed planted in the past that has now ripened. For example, if someone once saved another's life with great compassion, they created a strong, wholesome karma. At the time of death, if that karma ripens, it can lead them to be reborn in a fortunate realm such as a favorable human condition or a heavenly plane. Conversely, if someone committed a grave, unwholesome act, such as killing a parent, and that karma ripens at death, it will pull them into a realm of suffering. Karma not only determines the plane of rebirth, it also influences the circumstances of the new life, lifespan, health, intelligence, relationships. This is called karmic result, vipaka. Importantly, even when a strong karma leads the rebirth, other karmas remain latent and can ripen when conditions allow. Thus, being reborn in a good realm does not mean one will never encounter suffering. Likewise, one in a painful realm may still meet with wholesome results from the past. Understood this way, we see why samsara does not require a first beginning in order to operate. As long as ignorance and craving are present, we create karma. Karma then becomes the condition for a subsequent life. The new life again creates new karma. In this manner, the stream of existence continues without end. Karma is the fuel for the wheel of samsara. But the Buddha did not teach karma so that we resign ourselves to fate. He taught it so we can transform it. Because karma is produced by intentional action, we can deliberately plant new wholesome seeds, gradually replacing the unwholesome seeds already sown. This is the meaning of observing precepts, practicing meditation, and cultivating compassion and wisdom. When the wisdom of not-self arises, we not only plant wholesome karma, but also move toward undefiled action, non-outflow deeds that are no longer tinged by greed, hatred, and delusion. When such undefiled action ripens, it does not lead to rebirth, but to Nibbana, the complete cessation of the stream of continuity. In other words, karma is the cause of continuity, but by understanding and transforming karma, we can also end that continuity. This is the crucial point the Buddha wanted practitioners to recognize. The round of rebirth is not a life sentence. It is like a machine being fueled. If we stop supplying fuel, the machine stops on its own. Therefore, instead of trying to find where a soul began, the practitioner concentrates on the question, what karma am I creating right now? The answer lies in every daily thought, word, and deed. Are we creating wholesome or unwholesome karma? Are we feeding the continuation or weakening it? It is precisely mindfulness in each mind moment that leads us out of beginningless samsara, not by tracing a distant past, but by transforming the present in this very life. When people speak of continuity from one life to the next, many picture a familiar scene. When the body dies, a soul separates, floats away, and seeks a new place to enter. This image appears in many religious traditions, in films, and in folk tales. It makes dying and rebirth seem like a person leaving an old house and moving into a new one. Under the light of the Abhidhamma, however, the Buddha shows reality to be entirely different. No soul departs the body, and no entity carries intact memory, personality, and identity across lives. What occurs is a relaying of the mind stream, and this relay happens instantaneously with no gap between two lives. To understand this, we need to grasp key Abhidhamma concepts, the death consciousness, kuti citta, and the rebirth linking consciousness, pati sandhi citta. The death consciousness is the final mind moment of the present life. When it ceases, it ends the entire mental process of this life. The rebirth linking consciousness is the first mind moment of the next life. It arises immediately after the death consciousness ceases a new link, continuing the stream of mind but occurring in a new realm. Crucially, there is no temporal gap between kuti-citta and pati-sandhi-citta. This process is so rapid it cannot be measured by physical time. It is like flipping a switch. A bulb goes off in one room, and at the same instant another bulb lights up in the room next door. There is no movement of light from one room to the other, only the transmission of current. In this analogy, the current is the rebirth-producing karma, the strongest karma giving fruit at the death moment that generates the new rebirth linking mind. This karma acts like a propelling force that carries the stream of mind to an appropriate realm. If it is wholesome, pahati sandhi arises in a fortunate realm. If unwholesome, it arises in an unhappy realm. Another important point: the rebirth linking consciousness does not carry the previous life's memories intact. It only carries karmic imprints, tendencies, potentials, and the results of past actions. This is why most of us cannot remember previous lives, yet we are still influenced by habits, abilities, and psychological inclinations that cannot be fully explained by this life alone. The Abhidhamma analyzes further. The rebirth-linking mind of a newly arisen being will be accompanied by certain mental factors depending on the karma that produced it. For example, if the rebirth-producing karma was a wholesome act accompanied by compassion, the rebirth-linking consciousness will be accompanied by wholesome mental factors such as faith, moral shame, moral dread, conscientiousness. If the producing karma was an unwholesome act rooted in anger, the rebirth-linking consciousness will be accompanied by unwholesome factors such as hatred, delusion, and restlessness. This shows that the initial character of a new life is not brought in by a soul, but is shaped by the type of karma that ripened at the moment of relinking. For this reason, from birth, people already differ in temperament abilities and psychological tendencies. An interesting point in this process is that material phenomena, that is the new body, also begin to form at exactly the same time as the rebirth-linking consciousness. In humans, this moment is the instant of conception, when the sperm and the ovum unite and the rebirth-linking consciousness arises in that zygote. This new existence is the result of three factors: parents, the material factor from the sperm and ovum; karma, the rebirth-driving force that determines the species of rebirth, physical form, and living circumstances; the rebirth-linking consciousness, the mental factor that connects with the mind stream from the previous life. None of these three is an immutable soul. Each arises dependently, and when its conditions end, it too ceases. A common question is whether there exists an intermediate state bardo between death and rebirth. In the Theravada tradition and the Abhidhamma, the answer is no. The mind stream connects immediately from one life to the next without a transitional stage. Some Mahayana texts, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, speak of a bardo. This is a skillful way of referring to a succession of mind moments in special circumstances, not a soul wandering between two lives. Understanding rebirth linking helps us see that what is called a soul is only the illusion of someone carrying an intact self across lives. In reality, no one goes anywhere. There is only a mind stream continued by conditions and karma. It is like water flowing through many reaches of a river. At each reach, the water bears traces of what it has passed: color, smell, clarity, yet no old drop moves there intact. This also explains why the Buddha emphasized the importance of the death-proximate mind. The final mind before death has great power in directing the karma that produces rebirth. If that mind is unwholesome due to anger, regret, or fear, it can activate bad karma and lead to rebirth in a painful realm. Conversely, if that mind is wholesome due to peace, letting go, recollection of the Buddha, and mindfulness, it can activate good karma and lead to rebirth in a fortunate realm. For this reason, in Buddhist traditions, especially in countries following the Southern School, the practice of keeping vigil and reminding the dying to maintain a calm and wholesome mind is extremely important. This is not to allow a soul to be liberated, but so that the final mind of this life plants wholesome conditions for the first mind of the next life. By understanding rebirth linking, we become less haunted by the question, "Where will my soul go?" and instead pay attention to the question, "What will my mind be like at the final moment?" That moment is not a full stop, but a door opening to a new life, and we can prepare for it from now. Sometimes concepts like rebirth linking mind stream and rebirth producing karma sound abstract and hard to picture. Many people, even after grasping the theory, still feel there must be something, some entity, some soul that travels from life to life. In daily life, we are too accustomed to the idea of an object leaving one place and going to another. The continuity of the mind stream is not like that. Begin with the image of kindling a lamp which the Buddha used. When you use a burning candle to light another candle, the new flame is created thanks to the old flame, but no old flame moves across. Flame is simply the phenomenon of combustion that occurs when wick and wax meet sufficient heat. The continuity here is due to the conditions of wick, wax, and heat, not a fixed entity jumping from place to place. So too with the mind stream. The rebirth linking consciousness arises due to the conditions of the death proximate mind and the karma that has ripened, not because some soul leaves this body and enters another. Another example is a river. If you stand at a stretch of river and look again an hour later, the water before you is entirely different. Yet we still call it by the same name, the Red River or the Mekong. The name makes us imagine a fixed entity, but in truth it is only water that is continually flowing and changing. People are the same. We use a name, a face, and a life story to assign ourselves an extended I. But in reality, it is only a continuously arising and ceasing stream of mind and body. Think of the light of a bulb. When you flip the switch, the bulb lights up. When you turn it off, the light disappears. If you immediately turn on another bulb, the light there seems to continue the light that just went out, but the old light did not move to the new bulb. Only the current that is energy runs through a different circuit. In the process of rebirth, this current is the rebirth-producing karma that transmits mental energy from the death proximate moment to the rebirth linking moment. Or imagine a person writing a story. You finish one sentence, then continue with the next. The later sentence connects to the earlier one and keeps the thread of meaning, but the previous sentence does not move into the next. It is only continuity in meaning and causality. Rebirth linking is the same. It continues the content of the death proximate mind, but the old mind does not pass over. A very familiar example is computer software. When you copy data from one machine to another, no original file jumps from one machine to the other. The data is simply recreated on a new platform through the conditions of copying. When the mind is reborn, it is karmic data being installed in a new life with no intact entity moving. These examples share a single point. Continuity happens by way of conditions, not through a fixed entity. This is the core of dependent origination that the Buddha taught. The important thing in contemplating these examples is to shatter the illusion of a permanent self or soul. We often cling to the image of I, from memories and personality to relationships, and we think that this I will pass through lives. When we understand continuity as like flame river light sentences or data, we see that no one goes anywhere. There is only a process that continues according to conditions. This does not mean that I vanishes into nothingness at death, because what continues karma and mental conditions still exists and bears fruit in a later life. Yet it also does not mean that I persists intact across lives. There is only a chain of causal connections in which each link is both the result of the previous link and the cause of the next. The Abhidhamma describes this process as the succession of 17 mind moments within a cognitive process. The final moment of this life, Cuticita, connects immediately with the Patisandhi Citta of the next life. There is no gap between them for any entity to move. All is a continuous series of arising and ceasing, like an unbroken piece of music composed of millions of discrete notes. These everyday examples not only make the rebirth process easier to picture, they also help us practice letting go. When we see clearly that there is no self traveling through lives, we worry less about what will happen to me, and instead focus on the causes we are planting now. What will continue in a future life is not me, but the results of what I do in the present. And when we understand this, we see that the question, where does the soul begin, already contains a false assumption that a real soul exists. When this assumption falls away, the question loses its weight. Another question appears instead. What is nourishing this stream of mind? And where is it heading? That is the question a practitioner should spend a lifetime answering through the way one actually lives. If reasoning and examples have made it clear that there is no immutable soul passing through lifetimes, the next question is why? Despite these arguments, most of humanity still believes in the existence of a soul. This belief is so strong that it has become the foundation of many religions, philosophies, and cultures over thousands of years. The answer lies in our everyday experience. Each morning when we wake up, we still remember who we are, still bear the same name, still live in the same house with the same family. We look in the mirror and see a familiar face, though it may show a few more lines or a little less youthful glow. When someone calls our name, we react at once, as if that name were our very self. Memories from childhood to the present link together into a continuous story, and we believe there must be something that holds it all together. That is what we call the soul. This belief is further reinforced by the feeling of continuity in consciousness. We sit here thinking about yesterday's meal and then making plans for tomorrow. Thought follows thought, feeling follows feeling, which makes us imagine there is a person inside who experiences everything. This continuity is so strong that without guidance from insight, it is hard to recognize it as only a rapid sequence of mind moments, arising and ceasing, succeeding one another, like frames in a film. A deeper cause is the fear of losing oneself. Without a soul, many people think, then death means the end. What meaning do all my efforts have? Fear of nothingness makes us cling to the belief that some immortal part of me will continue to exist. This belief brings comfort, like walking in the night while trusting that there will be light at the end of the road, which lessens panic. Belief in a soul is also nourished by attachment and affection. When we love someone deeply, we do not want to accept that they will be lost completely. We want to believe that their soul is somewhere, still remembers us, and can be met again. That feeling becomes a motive to defend the idea of an unchanging self, not only for oneself, but also for those we love. Traditional culture and religion play a large role as well. In many theistic religions, the soul is central to the doctrine. The soul is created, lives a life, and is then judged for reward or punishment. When we are born into such an environment, we absorb this belief as a natural part of our worldview. It becomes so obvious that few people question its validity. From the Abhidhamma perspective, all these reasons reduce to self-clinging atta. This is a subtle form of ignorance. It is the attachment to the notion that there is a real I, an immutable subject that controls and owns this body and mind. Self-clinging can be coarse, such as believing this body is me, or subtle, such as believing I am a soul separate from the body that still exists forever. Self-clinging does not exist only at the level of conscious belief. It is embedded in unconscious reflexes. When someone insults us, we react strongly because we feel I have been attacked. When praised, we feel elated because I have been affirmed. When looking at an old photo, we feel we miss our old self, even though that person is entirely different at the level of body and mind. These reactions repeat throughout life and reinforce the sense of a continuous I. For this reason, breaking the belief in an immutable soul cannot rely on reasoning alone. It requires directly observing the body and mind process moment by moment in order to see the arising and ceasing of all phenomena. When you sit quietly and observe the breath, you will see feelings change, thoughts change, and even the observer changes. If you sustain that observation long enough, you will realize there is no stationary subject, only a sequence of phenomena continuing in succession. Belief in a soul also clings easily because it provides a sense of psychological safety. Admitting that there is no soul means facing the truth that there is nothing to hold on to, no I to protect, no essence that guarantees the future. For a mind not yet steady, this truth can cause anxiety or fear. But as insight develops, that same truth becomes a great source of peace, because we are no longer bound to an I that must be maintained or defended. When the Buddha denied an immutable soul, he did not take away the hopes of beings. He opened another path. Rather than clinging to a non-existent entity place, trust in the law of cause and effect, and in the capacity for transformation in each mind moment. Instead of asking, "Where will my soul go?" Ask what causes is my mind planting. This question does not lead us into fear or delusion. It takes us straight into practice, into changing the present, in order to create a better future, whether that future is in this life or another. By understanding the roots of belief in the soul from lived experience, the feeling of continuity, the fear of losing oneself, emotional attachment and culture, we will blame others less when they have not accepted the doctrine of not-self, because everyone must go through this process from self-clinging to doubt to the direct realization of not-self. From here, we also become more patient with ourselves, recognizing that self-clinging does not dissolve overnight, but requires time, cultivation, and realization. Once we see clearly the reasons people believe in an immutable soul, another question usually arises. If there is no soul, where does this stream of life begin, and where will it end? Here, the Buddhist view differs entirely from theistic religions and goes beyond our usual way of thinking. In most belief systems, life is explained by a starting point, either created from nothing by a creator or produced by some primordial event. As for the end, they often imagine an eternal conclusion, the soul resting forever in a blessed realm, or condemned forever to a realm of suffering or dissolving completely. The Buddha, contemplating with insight, saw a different reality. This stream of life is without beginning and without end. Beginningless means no first moment can be found. You can trace back through as many lives and cycles of rebirth as you wish and still never meet the first day of that being, because this life arises from the karma of the previous life, and that previous life from one before it, extending back with no starting point. The Buddha once said, "Bhikkhus, the round of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point of beings who are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, who wander and roam on for a long time, is not seen." Endless means this stream of life has no necessary endpoint either. If ignorance and craving remain, the round of birth and death continues. Only when a being has completely ended ignorance and craving does the wheel come to a halt, and this is called nirvana. Nirvana is not a place where a soul arrives, nor is it nothingness. It is the cessation of the process of arising and ceasing. It is like a wheel that stops turning when its fuel is exhausted, not because it is destroyed, but because the conditions for its operation are no longer present. The image of a circle makes this easier to grasp. If you draw a circle, can you point to where the first point island? In fact, you cannot, because a circle has neither beginning nor end. Any point on the circle could be called the start, but that is only a convention. So too, with the stream of life. We can choose one lifetime and call it the beginning, but it is only one segment among countless segments in the round of rebirth. It is like the water cycle. Water evaporates into clouds, clouds become rain, rain becomes rivers, rivers flow to the sea, and the sea again evaporates. If someone asks where the very first drop began, those who understand the cycle will smile, knowing there cannot be a first drop in a process that is continuously operating. What matters, however, is that this circle can stop. Unlike the natural water cycle, the round of rebirth is fueled by ignorance and craving. These two factors can be completely cut off when ignorance is replaced by wisdom and craving is replaced by equanimity and compassion. The link that feeds the turning is severed, and the process of rebirth ends. This opens an entirely different perspective. We cannot trace a first point for ourselves, but we can determine the end of the round of birth and death through practice. Ending here does not mean vanishing. It means no longer being swept up in a process of suffering governed by ignorance. The Abhidharma explains this process more precisely through dependent origination. The round of rebirth continues because the 12 links of dependent origination operate in succession: ignorance, formations, consciousness, name, and form. 6 sense bases: contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, aging, and death with Crawford, suffering. If any link is cut, the round stops. A practitioner who contemplates impermanence, suffering, and not self is weakening these links. especially ignorance and craving. As long as we have not seen not self, we still imagine there is a me moving from one life to another. So the questions, where did I begin and where will I end, continue to trouble and even frighten us. When we clearly see that there is no immutable I, those questions gradually lose their weight. We then ask instead what is nourishing this turning and how to stop it. The view of beginningless and endless helps us drop the search for an absolute origin and shift our attention to present reality. According to the Buddha, it is precisely the present with its thoughts, feelings, and actions that can change the entire round of rebirth. The endless past cannot be changed, and the boundless future has not yet arrived. Only the present is the doorway out. In short, there is no first point to trace, and no fixed last point waiting ahead. This stream of life is beginningless and endless, yet it can be brought to cessation through wisdom and liberation. That is why the Buddha did not encourage the search for an ultimate beginning, but urged us to see the conditions for arising and the conditions for cessation. Right here, the round of rebirth can come to a close. Once we understand that samsara is beginningless and endless, and that continuity occurs through karma and the rebirth linking mind, a natural question arises. How does a new life begin? If no soul moves from life to life, what actually happens at the initial moment of a being? In the Abhidhamma, the arising of a new life is explained as the convergence of three factors: karma, the force that leads to rebirth and determines the type of body realm life circumstances and basic potentials of the new existence; parents, the material factor, sperm and ovum, that provides the biological foundation of the body; the rebirth, linking consciousness, the first mind moment of the new life, that connects the mind stream from the previous life to the present one. When these three factors meet at the right time and under the right conditions, a new life begins. If any factor is missing, conception does not occur. For this reason, Buddhism teaches that karma decides where and how one is reborn, not merely that parents give birth to a child. To picture this, imagine a new life as a seed. Parents provide the soil and water. The material condition, karma, is the species of the seed, rice, mango, orange, and the rebirth linking mind is the vital sprout that starts the development. When soil, water, seed, and sprout come together, the plant begins to grow. In this process, the rebirth-producing karma plays the key role. It is the type of karma strong enough to determine the place of rebirth. This may be weighty karma, garuka karma, extremely wholesome or unwholesome deeds such as deep meditative attainment or parricide; death-proximate karma, asana karma, wholesome or unwholesome acts that occur just before dying; habitual karma, asana, karma actions repeated often throughout life; chance or residual karma, less significant actions that can ripen when other karmas are not operative. Once the rebirth-producing karma ripens, it determines the realm of rebirth. Buddhism speaks of 31 planes grouped into 3 spheres. The sensual sphere includes heavenly realms, the human realm, and unhappy realms such as hells, hungry ghosts, animals, and asuras. The form sphere comprises meditative heavens with only subtle material form without coarse sensual desire. The formless sphere comprises realms with only mind without material body. As soon as the rebirth-producing karma has determined the realm, the rebirth-linking consciousness arises together with appropriate mental factors. For example, if rebirth as a human is due to wholesome karma, the rebirth-linking mind will be accompanied by wholesome mental factors such as faith, moral shame, moral dread, and joy. If rebirth in an unhappy realm is due to unwholesome karma, it will be accompanied by unwholesome factors such as anger, delusion, and heedlessness. This explains why even in early childhood people already differ innately in temperament, psychological tendencies, and capacity for ethics or knowledge. Not everything is explained by heredity or environment. The karmic imprint in the rebirth-linking mind also plays a part. It is noteworthy that in humans, the moment the rebirth-linking consciousness enters the zygote, that is when sperm and ovum unite, is when a new life truly begins. From that point, name and form develop together, form from the material factors, Name from the stream of mind. Name and form interact continuously. Mind influences the development of body, and body in turn affects mind. The Abhidhamma views this formation as a pair of interlocked gears. One gear is name phenomena, and one gear is material phenomena. They turn together from the moment of rebirth, linking until the moment of the death mind. When one stops, the other stops as well. With this understanding, we see clearly that there is no soul waiting to enter a body. There is only a mind stream continued from the previous life that is installed upon the material foundation provided by the parents under the direction of the rebirth-producing karma. This recognition has two important effects. It lessens attachment and self-clinging, for we see that in this life we are only a temporary combination of name and form that have come together due to conditions. It also increases our sense of responsibility for the present, for we know that what we think, say, and do today will become conditions for the next life. Thus, when Buddhism says that rebirth is never the migration of a soul, it does not deny continuity. It clarifies the nature of that continuity. There is no immutable entity. There is only the operation of conditionality. Once we understand the arising of a new life through the three factors, karma, parents, and the rebirth linking mind, we see something important. Buddhism does not use the notion of a soul to explain continuity, but the notion of karmic consciousness. Because both concern the mental or conscious aspect that spans more than one life, many people confuse them. So what is karmic consciousness, and how does it differ from a soul? First, in many religions and philosophies, the soul is understood as an immutable spiritual entity that exists independently of the body, preserves identity, memory, character across lifetimes, may be rewarded or punished forever in a fixed realm, and is the true owner that controls body and mind. By contrast, karmic consciousness in Buddhism is entirely different and not immutable. It is a stream of knowing that arises and ceases moment by moment, always changing with conditions, with no fixed core. It is not independent. It exists only when the requisite conditions are present. Sense bases like eye and ear, sense objects like forms and sounds, and the mind base with ideas and memories. It does not carry intact memory and identity. At rebirth, karmic consciousness does not bring the whole memory of the previous life. It only continues the potentials and tendencies left by karma. Nor is it an absolute controller. It is shaped by karma and circumstances, and thus lacks the sovereign power attributed to a self or soul. An easy image is this. The soul in common belief is like a driver who leaves one car and gets into another, yet remains the same person. Karmic consciousness is like a stream of data in software. When installed on a new machine, it continues to operate, but its structure and behavior change with the new hardware operating system and conditions. This difference matters because it completely changes how we see ourselves and life. If we believe in an immutable soul, we easily fall into two extremes. Eternalism, thinking I will exist forever. We cling to a fixed self and try to preserve it. Annihilationism, thinking that when the body ends, the soul also ends or becomes nothing. We drift into resignation. Buddhism avoids both extremes by showing there is no permanent mind, yet there is also not a total erasure. There is only a stream of karmic consciousness that continues when conditions are sufficient and ceases when they end. This also explains why two people can be reborn into materially similar circumstances, yet differ entirely in character capacity and inclination. They carry karmic imprints, tendencies, and potentials sown previously, rather than an intact soul. Another difference is that the soul in common belief is regarded as the real I, whereas karmic consciousness in Buddhism is not self. Although it links lifetimes, it is only a process of phenomena, not anyone at all. The Abhidhamma analyzes karmic consciousness into many types of mind depending on the realm and mental conditions. For example, the rebirth linking mind in the human realm differs from that in heavenly realms or unhappy realms. Each type of mind is accompanied by different mental factors that shape the initial tendencies of the new life. This shows that karmic consciousness is not a constant entity preserved across lives, but a sequence of phenomena, always changing, conditioned by karma and the circumstances of rebirth. In short, the soul is a fixed, self-existing entity. Karmic consciousness is an arising and ceasing process that changes due to compounded conditions. Seeing this difference, we cling less to the notions "I will go on forever" or "I will be lost completely." Instead, we focus on purifying the present stream of karmic consciousness, because this stream will continue into a later life, so long as ignorance and craving remain. When it is nourished by wholesome states, wisdom, and compassion, it not only leads to better conditions, but also weakens the links that keep the round of rebirth turning. And when the insight of non-self is fully perfected, the stream of karmic consciousness ceases, not because I is erased, but because there is nothing left to continue. Belief in an immutable soul may sound harmless, even comforting in the face of death, but looked at closely, it brings subtle psychological and behavioral consequences that can become major obstacles to practice and liberation. First consequence, it strengthens self-clinging. Believing some part of me is permanent, we clutch at image, honor, property, opinions, and even relationships as extensions of that me. Such clinging makes us quick to anger when insulted, prone to jealousy when thwarted, and fearful before change or loss. The teaching of non-self shows that everything we cling to is compounded and cannot be held forever. Second consequence, a conservative, hard-to-change mindset. If we think the real me is immutable, we assume our character and abilities are fixed. We then make little effort to transform ourselves, or we judge some people as innately bad and beyond change. Buddhism teaches that all minds are impermanent, and everyone can be transformed through practice, because there is no fixed, permanently unwholesome core. Third consequence, an illusion of perpetual, personal existence. Those who believe in an immutable soul often imagine post-mortem life as a prolonged version of this one, the same me, the same character and memories, just elsewhere. This illusion can breed complacency, "I'll fix things in the next life," and thus delay transformation now. With non-self and dependent origination, we see each mind moment is unique and unrepeatable, and only the present is the time to plant wholesome causes. Fourth consequence, outsourcing responsibility to an external power. In many religions, the soul is judged by a supreme being, and the afterlife depends on that being's pardon or grace. This easily engenders reliance: perform a few rites or believe, and the soul will be saved. In Buddhism, by contrast, no one else can save us apart from the transformation of our own mind. Fifth consequence, misunderstanding the aim of practice. Believing in an immutable soul, many take practice to mean cleansing the soul or securing a pleasant place for it after death. This easily turns practice into an egoic project for me in the future, rather than an expression of compassion and wisdom. Buddhism teaches that practice is to end suffering for all, grounded in the understanding that there is no fixed boundary between me and others within the web of conditions. Sixth consequence, greater fear in the face of death. It may seem that belief in a soul reduces fear, but if we think I will continue intact, we worry even more about where I will be taken, how I will live, and in what environment. Such fear can agitate the death-proximate mind, enabling unwholesome karma to ripen and leading to unfavorable rebirth. By contrast, one who understands non-self and dependent origination can meet death with equanimity, knowing there is only continuation of process, and no, I thrown into an unknown fate. The final and subtlest consequence is that it obstructs insight into non-self. As long as the notion of a soul, however refined, remains, the mind still has a foothold, something with which to identify. This makes insight meditation on non-self difficult, because some part of the mind keeps whispering there is still a me somewhere. Realization of non-self occurs only when every foothold dissolves, when the mind clearly sees that all phenomena simply arise, persist, and cease due to conditions with no owner. Because of these consequences, the Buddha called self-view, including clinging to an immutable soul, one of the strongest fetters binding beings. It is both coarse and subtle, plainly visible in daily behavior, yet buried deep in the layers of consciousness. To break this fetter, reason alone is not enough. One must combine listening to the Dhamma, careful reflection, and meditative investigation to see directly how the body-mind process operates without a self. Seeing the consequences of believing in an immutable soul, we become more cautious toward ideas or teachings, even those claiming a spiritual banner that in fact reinforce self-clinging. At the same time, we grow more patient and compassionate toward those who still hold this belief, knowing that letting it go is a long journey, one we ourselves are also traveling. When people hear about non-self, many assume it is a lofty philosophical theory, hard to apply in everyday life. In truth, non-self is not remote. It is simply a different way of seeing. When this way of seeing becomes the ground of our thinking and action, life changes in practical, unmistakable ways. The first and most visible benefit is a reduction of suffering born from attachment. Most pains in life come from the I being hurt, criticized, deprived, failing, or thwarted. When we believe in a fixed me, every negative event feels like a wound to our essence. Seeing that there is no immutable self, only a body-mind process arising and ceasing due to conditions, we identify less with events. Praise and blame are only sounds. Gain and loss are only shifts in conditions. They touch no self because such a self has never existed. A second benefit is easier forgiveness and letting go. With non-self, we stop viewing others as fixed selves. A harmful deed does not prove someone is intrinsically bad. In that moment, an unwholesome mind arose due to conditions and karma. With different conditions, they could act differently. This view loosens resentment and fosters forgiveness, since no one is unchangeable, and like us all, can transform. A third benefit is greater adaptability to change. Life is always in flux, and change unsettles those who cling to I and mine. Seeing that everything, our own body and mind included, arises dependently and will change, we are neither surprised nor frightened by upheaval. Instead, we learn to adapt, adjust, and move with the flow mindfully, rather than resist fruitlessly. A fourth benefit is less comparison and envy. Self-clinging constantly puts us on a measuring stick against others who is more beautiful, richer, more skilled. Under non-self, such comparisons lose meaning, for there is no fixed me to set against another. Each person is a unique process with different conditions and karmic streams. From this understanding, sympathetic joy arises more easily, and we focus on cultivating our own process. A fifth benefit is freedom from the pressure to become. Many live under stress, chasing a perfect image, a best version of me to feel worthy. Non-self shows there is no fixed me to upgrade. There are only wholesome and unwholesome states arising and passing. The aim is no longer to become somebody, but to cultivate more wholesome states and gradually abandon the unwholesome. A sixth benefit is release from fear of death. Fear of death often stems from believing that I will be lost forever or will continue intact in some unknown place. With non-self, we see that the so-called I is merely a stream of conditions, and death is the ending of one series of conditions and the beginning of another, if ignorance and craving remain. Death is not the loss of me, since that me was never real. It is a transition in the process of phenomena. Fear subsides and equanimity grows. A seventh benefit is a wider compassion. As the wall between me and others thins, we see all beings as dependently arisen processes shaped by karma and conditions. Without the rigid I versus they, empathy for the suffering of all creatures comes naturally, and love is no longer confined by personal or group boundaries. Practically, the lens of non-self makes practice lighter. Rather than trying to remodel a solid block called myself, we simply identify and change the conditions that feed unwholesome states, while planting conditions that foster wholesome ones. It is like gardening. We don't change the soil into something else. We amend it, pull the weeds, and plant good seeds. These benefits are not for admiring and shelving. They are concrete shifts in how we live, fewer extreme reactions, less self-torment, less fear, less blame, alongside more calm adaptability, joy in others' good and compassion. Non-self does not strip life of meaning. It returns the freedom to live unbound by the phantom called I. When non-self becomes lived experience moment by moment, life grows much lighter. Only then do we truly grasp the Buddha's words, "Nothing is mine, nothing is me, nothing is myself." Having clearly seen the non-self nature of the mind stream, understanding that I is only a dependently arisen process, continuing moment to moment, a natural question arises. How can this stream cease its revolving in samsara? How can this process of arising and ceasing no longer be driven by unwholesome karma into suffering? The Buddha called this cessation Nibbana. Nibbana is not a place where a soul arrives, not an eternal sleep, and certainly not nihilism. It is the complete ending of the causes that feed the round of rebirth, especially ignorance, avidya, and craving, tanhana. The key point is that the stream does not stop by itself. It runs like a great wheel pushed by the energy of karma. To halt the wheel, we must stop supplying fuel. In the teaching of the 12 links of dependent origination, ignorance and craving are the primary fuel. Break one of these links and the entire chain collapses. How to break it? The Buddha pointed out a very clear path. Virtue, concentration and wisdom, sila, samadhi, panya. Ethical discipline, sila, is the foundation. Keeping precepts is not merely about being a good person, but about protecting the mind from the turmoil of remorse and the consequences of unwholesome karma. Only a mind untroubled by misconduct can go deep into concentration and wisdom. Concentration, samadhi, is the mind's collectedness and tranquility. When the mind is gathered to a single point, it becomes clear and steady, capable of observing phenomena without being swept away. Concentration is the lamp that illuminates each mind moment and material event, allowing us to see arising and passing away. Wisdom, panya, is seeing things as they truly are. It is not book knowledge, but direct insight in meditation, seeing that the body is not self, that feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness are not self, seeing that all phenomena are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. When this wisdom arises, ignorance begins to dissolve. Each time ignorance weakens, craving weakens with it, for we only desire and cling to what we imagine to be ours. When nothing is seen as mine, there is no reason to cling. Once both ignorance and craving have been utterly ended, the stream of consciousness has no conditions by which to relink. Previously accumulated wholesome or unwholesome karmas still remain in the storehouse of latent potentials, but with craving no longer fueling their reappearance, they can no longer lead to rebirth. This is the state of an arahant. The body continues to live due to past karma, but when the body breaks up, there is no further rebirth. In the Abhidhamma, this is described as the mind stream ceasing at the final death moment without giving rise to a subsequent rebirth linking mind. It is like a lamp going out when the oil is finished, not because someone snuffed it, but because the sustaining condition is no longer present. Importantly, the ending of the mind stream does not mean losing oneself or falling into nothingness. What ends is only the process of suffering driven by ignorance and craving. What remains is Nibbana, unborn, unceasing, unconditioned, hence not describable in the language of the phenomenal world. Heard only in outline, this path can seem distant, but the Buddha taught that it begins with very small things. When anger first arises, see it, and don't let it drive your actions. When greed first appears, recognize it and set it down. When loving kindness appears, nourish it. Each mindful moment like this is a step on the path that frees the stream of consciousness. There is no need to wait for big conditions to be ready, because each present moment is precisely where new karma is made and old karma is transformed. Therefore, practice in Buddhism is not to prepare a soul for after death, but to transform the present stream of consciousness. For this present stream is the very fuel for the stream of a future life, or for complete cessation if wisdom is perfected. In other words, freeing the mind stream is not a far-off affair of the future. It is the work of each moment now. Each time we release a clinging, the burden of ignorance and craving grows lighter. When it is light enough that there is nothing left to grasp, the stream stops on its own like a wheel that no longer turns when there is no more push. We began this journey from a question that has haunted humanity for millennia. Where do the souls of beings begin? We have looked at it from many angles, from the common notion of a soul to the Buddha's view of non-self, from the process of consciousness arising and ceasing to the role of karma, from the formation of a new life to the path that frees the mind. Stream. It is time to close with a concise yet penetrating answer. According to Buddhism, the question already contains a mistaken assumption that a real soul exists. When seen with wisdom, the Buddha discerned that there is no immutable entity called a soul. What we habitually call I is only a temporary combination of the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. All are impermanent, conditioned, and not me. If there is no immutable soul, then asking where does it begin loses meaning. The right question becomes, how does this stream of consciousness, this interplay of mentality, nama, and materiality, rupa, operate and continue? The Abhidhamma answers the stream has no absolute first beginning, anadi. It persists because it is fed by ignorance and craving and guided by karma. When a life ends at the final death moment, rebirth-producing karma activates a rebirth-linking mind in a new life without any soul as intermediary. This continuation is lightning fast without any gap and occurs only when conditions are sufficient. So if one asks where it begins, the answer is it does not begin at a single point, but from immeasurable causes and conditions amassed in a past that cannot be traced to its end, like a circle with no starting point, or the water cycle with no first drop. And if one asks where it ends, the answer is it ends when the causes that feed it end. When ignorance fades and craving ceases, when karma no longer has the power to lead to rebirth, the stream comes to rest. That is Nibbana, the ending of the painful round of samsara, not nothingness, but peace beyond arising and passing. This brings us to a practical conclusion. Instead of seeking a remote primordial starting point, what matters is to see clearly the causes that nourish the stream of life right now. It is here in the present that we can plant new causes, prune unwholesome conditions, and cultivate the wholesome conditions that lead to freedom. Looking back, we can see that answering the initial question has carried us through 3 layers of understanding. Dismantling the false assumption, there is no immutable soul, only nama rupa compounded by conditions. Understanding the mechanism continuity of mind through karma, with no beginning and no person migrating from life to life. Seeing the way out, ending ignorance and craving through virtue, concentration and wisdom, so the continuation ceases. When this is truly absorbed, the obsession, where did I come from, where will I go, fades. We no longer waste energy on metaphysical speculation, but devote ourselves to living mindfully moment by moment. Each mindful moment is a step out of ignorance, a step that lessens craving, a step that lightens samsara's load. And this is perhaps the Buddha's deepest message. We need not know where ignorance began. We need only know how it ends. So if someone asks you, where do the souls of beings begin, you can smile and say, there is no soul to begin with. There is only a beginningless web of conditions, and the most important thing is that it can come to an end in this very moment if we are awake.